welcome back to the DTVC Extra podcast. With this episode, we're going to start our look at Donnie Yen's Ip Man series. We're going to be looking at Ip Man 2, and then we're going to do a bonus segment here to round out the show, looking at Wonder Woman 84, which I saw recently as well. And then, in 2 weeks' time, we'll finish this one off. We'll have Ip Man 3, also we'll do Ip Man 4, and then I discovered also there's a spin-off movie called Master Z, the Ip Man Legacy, that came out between numbers 3 and 4. Has a really great cast. It's got like Michelle Yeoh. It's got Dave Bautista, Tony Jaa's in it. So that could be. I thought when I discovered that there was that spin-off one, I thought, all right, why don't I include that in here? And I guess that's going to make it with this bonus segment on Wonder Woman 84. It makes it kind of almost like equal, right? We'll have two sets of three segments, or 2 episodes of 3 segments. So that's the plan there. And then I think when we finish with the Ip Man series, I'm thinking I might get into the Superman series, just because that's one that I'm kind of curious. After having Sean Malloy on to do I Must Break This podcast to talk about the Canon Films documentary, the Electric Boogaloo, the wild untold story of Canon Films, and talking about Superman 4 in that one, it kind of got me interested. And I think also too, doing the recent comic book movie things, that's also been a part of it. Just sort of wanting to be just kind of getting interested in that kind of thing again. So I think that might be what I'll do, is maybe, and what that series would be like Superman's 1, 2, 3, Supergirl 4, and then also the Returns, the Brandon Ruth one. That's probably what that one would look like. So maybe like 3 episodes of 2 movies, or 2 of 3, right? Because if we do 3 movies, if I can kind of keep myself up to watching 3 movies at a time, we'll see what happens there. Because I ended up doing 3 movies this time, because I did Ip Man and then Ip Man 2. And then I discovered The Grandmaster, which was directed by one of my favorite directors, Wong Kar Wai, was also covering the same territory. It was also about the life of Ip Man, who was famous for being Bruce Lee's trainer, right? Who taught Bruce Lee Kung Fu. So he'd done the same movie, and I thought, okay, the material kind of dovetails a bit, so I just kind of watched that one as well. So I'll probably talk about that more in the second segment, just because that movie kind of encompasses what the first 2 movies of the Ip Man series look at. So I'll probably do that as well. We'll do that then. So I think kind of get into a little bit of why I decided to even do this, the Ip Man films. The Ip Man films were first put on my radar because again, remember that there's that period, that hiatus period that I was on there between like 2014 and 2019. And that's about when, I think some of the Ip Man films came out, like I think the first one comes out in 2008. So it's a little bit before I was on hiatus, but I wasn't paying as much attention to those kinds of things. When I got back from hiatus, of course, everybody's telling me you've got to watch Avengement, right? That's the big one. Like I was reviewing some Scott Adkins movies, and they're like, you got to watch Avengement. And I looked on IMDb and I saw that he had 5 movies in 2019, and one of them was Ip Man 4. And I thought, well, okay, at some point I'll probably have to review that for the site, right? Because it's got Scott Adkins in it. But I was like, when am I going to do the other 3 movies? And do I want to do the other? What would be the purpose of that? And I kind of just sort of put it aside. And also, I haven't, I'm kind of behind a little bit on Adkins movies, so I probably need to catch up with some. I mean, he's got the sequel to Accident Man that I haven't done yet, the sequel to One Shot that I haven't done yet. So I could stand to do some more Adkins anyway, before I even get to Ip Man 4. So it kind of got set aside for a bit. And then in May, I visited my family, and I was watching John Wick 4 for, that series that I was doing for the DTVC Extra, where I was looking at the John Wick films, and I hadn't seen 4 yet. And of course, Donnie Yen is fantastic in it. He really makes that movie, along with how well Keanu Reeves does in the stunts and some of the stunt work, just so inspired anyway. But Donnie Yen is just absolutely amazing in that movie, and that kind of brought me back to the Ip Man series. At the same time, I was talking with my friend Mike, who lives in New England, who's Star Trek fan, and we were talking Star Trek, and that kind of also got me into thinking about doing the old Trek movies, and so that's why I ended up going with the old Trek movies after the John Wick films. But there was a sense of like, okay, well, the Ip Man ones are kind of there as well, and I think it was like one of those things, like I started watching the Star Trek movies and then realized like, oh, I was thinking about doing Ip Man. But I figured, okay, I'll just table it and do it after. So that's why we're doing those movies now. They're all on YouTube. One of the things I would say about the YouTube ones that I've seen so far, for at least 1 and 2, so I was watching them in the original Mandarin, which I believe it's Mandarin and not Cantonese. I think the Wong Kar Wai one is in Cantonese. Actually, it's Cantonese, Mandarin as well, so it's both. But anyway, I went with the original language and subtitles, because that's usually how I watch foreign movies. Yes, I also, with Hong Kong movies, I do like to watch dubbed as well. I mean, the Cynthia Rothrock ones, or something like Millionaires Express, that those kinds of movies, I do like to watch them dubbed a little bit more, like Shaw Brothers kinds of movies. But generally, it's a foreign movie. I want to watch the original language and then subtitles, just because I feel like I get a better sense of the movie that way. One of the problems with YouTube when you do, or not YouTube, with Tubi, when you do that, is the subtitles don't sync well with their voices. And it's just these movies, because I watched the Grandmaster, the Wong Kar Wai film, on Tubi as well, and it was synced really well. I think maybe because, Wong Kar Wai being an art house director, I guess more people are used to watching his movies, or there's an expectation that you're going to watch that with subtitles, whereas maybe most people don't watch that, because if you go to Tubi, I think it's 3 different versions of the Ip Man movie. So you have the English dub version, you have the original Chinese, Japanese, etc., with subtitles, and then there's also a Spanish dub version. So because I guess they have all those versions, that I guess wanting to do it with the original language and subtitles, it's not synced well. So you might have the subtitle pop up 30 seconds before somebody says what they're supposed to say. And when we get into the second movie, it's really confusing, because you've actually, that one takes place in, English-controlled Hong Kong. So you have people that are speaking English as a first language, and it's hard to attribute, like, is this something that they're saying in Chinese, or that, so that's one of the issues that I would say with this. And so, and I guess if you're someone who prefers the dubbed version of movies, you probably won't care, right? It probably won't matter to you. But that was one issue that I had watching this. Maybe I'll do a quick synopsis, and then maybe, we'll talk about how I felt about the movie. We'll start with the first one here. So, Ip Man, it takes place, it starts in the 1930s in China, pre-Japanese invasion. The city of Foshan, which is, I believe, in the Guangzhou province in the southern part of the country. Donnie Yen plays Ip Man, who is, son of a wealthy family. He has his own mansion. He's got a wife and a son. He's also Grandmaster of Wing Chun Kung Fu. People are coming to the South to challenge different schools and prove their mettle. He's not so keen on answering these challenges, and of course his wife really doesn't want people, she'd rather her husband be a husband and a father than be some guy who's getting into duels and fighting with people all the time. But he kind of sorts some people out. He kind of does his thing. Shows that he is the true master, right? He's beaten a couple people. At one point we get Xu Wong Fan, right? Who I guess he's credited as Fan Sui Wong in the film, but him, of course, as Ricky from Ricky O. Also, Attrition, the Seagal movie, where he was fantastic in that one. Probably one of the best late Seagal movies, wouldn't you say? I think probably I'm trying to think of how many good Seagal movies we've had in the 2010s. That might be, maybe that's the only one, good one in the 2010s. I don't know. Of course, he's in other films. He's in Righting Wrongs. He's definitely been around for a while, and somebody that I always enjoy seeing. So it was great to see him here. But anyway, he challenges Ip Man and gets beaten pretty soundly, even though he's beating everybody else. And so then, kind of things are left, and then the Japanese invade. And so when the Japanese invade, they take Ip Man's mansion. He has to live in, he and his wife and young son, they have to live kind of in a small little apartment or something. They're pretty much homeless. They're struggling to get food. He has a friend named Quan who has a cotton factory that is being allowed to be kept open by the Japanese. So to make money, one thing he does is he starts working in a coal mine, and then one of the Japanese generals, wanting to show how superior Japanese kung fu is to Chinese kung fu, he's having them recruit coal workers to fight in these tournament type things, where he Donnie Yen goes there to see some of the people that he knew fighting in those things. But then also Si Wong Fan comes back to he's kind of working with these bandits that raid things, and he goes and attacks the cotton factory. And so Donnie Yen offers to train all of the workers in Wing Chun Kung Fu. At the same time, he's kind of getting in, kind of getting a sense of what's happening with these tournaments. And when a couple of his friends end up dying in these tournaments, he goes there and he's kind of challenging that general. So things come to a head, right? First, he's got to beat off Si Wong Fong to protect his friend's factory. At the same time, he ends up getting challenging this general to a match, right? And there's a sense that if he wins the match, he might get killed by some of the other Japanese soldiers, but that's the key. And he's really kind of doing this for the soul of Japan under Japanese, so the soul of China under Japanese occupation. And he succeeds. Spoiler alert! And he is smuggled out of the country smuggled out of Foshan and into Hong Kong, where he, according to the post credits, that's where he lives after the war. So that's that. So there's kind of two things, right, with this movie. There's the historical accuracy element of it, which it's not very historically accurate, which is fine. But then you have kind of just the general story part of it. Is the story itself compelling on its own, which I think it is. I really enjoyed kind of the ups and downs of how that worked. But then also Donnie Yen is just fantastic as the lead, right? He's everything you want from a lead in this one. He plays the character perfectly. His martial arts is fantastic. Sammo Hung does the martial arts choreography for this film and the next one in Ip Man 2. Really fantastic scenes. A lot of the ones that he has. So he's got the ones with Si Wong Fan that I talked about that were really good. The Japanese general is played by Hiroyuki Ikuchi, who is he's part Honduran, part Japanese. He's a really fantastic bad guy. He plays that part really well, and he has a really great fight scene. I mean, that fight scene at the end is maybe a little anticlimactic because it's kind of hard to really do. It's hard for them to set the stage for a really good fight scene between the two of them. When earlier, Donnie Yen as Ip Man takes out 10 Japanese martial artists at once. So it's kind of hard to be like, oh well, now he's gonna have trouble with one general. So that fight was a little anticlimactic considering the build up to it, right, and everything that we get there. But other than that, I mean, really great scenes. I think the other thing too, I mean, the movie clocks in at about 105 minutes, and in that 105 minutes, they do a really great job of sort of keeping us paced with fight scenes. And I think the other thing I like that they do is they keep us paced with fight scenes, but they also sort of save Donnie Yen's fight scenes. They make them kind of something special, right? There's a build up to them. Like, okay, you want to see him as the main character, as like kind of this martial arts master. You want to see him sort people out. But they almost kind of leave it, right? Like he doesn't always want to fight. He's not always going to fight people, but it's almost like one of the things like you just can't wait for him to do it and take people down. And I think that's something that's really kind of cool that they do that. So that they've got fights, consistently throughout the movie. I mean, it plays out exactly the way you'd want, think of like a musical, right? Where you have a musical number every like 10 to 15 minutes. That's kind of what you get with fight scenes here, which is nice. I think they also, depicting the Japanese occupation. I think they do a good job with that in terms of like what that would have been like. We know sort of the atrocities that were committed by the Japanese at that time, and they do a good job depicting that as well. Historically, yes, there's definitely some liberties taken historically. Like there's no mention of him, sort of there's no mention of him being in Japan or being in China or in Foshan and having these sort of events happen to him. Yes, I believe his mansion was confiscated by the Japanese when when the invasion happened. From there, it's kind of like, okay, what was he? There's a sense that maybe he might have been a secret agent. There's no real corroboration of that. It may have been he just kind of goes to Hong Kong and because according to his real life story, he went to Hong Kong where he trained in more Wing Chun Kung Fu and then came back to Foshan and was the master there. There's no sense that he needed to be smuggled out of Foshan into Hong Kong, right? That there's none of that kind of thing happened. No standing up to the Japanese in that way or that kind of thing. Of course, this is a Chinese production, so they take liberties with certain aspects. Like for example, in the end, kind of when they're buttoning things up, they say that the Japanese surrendered to the Chinese. Not really accurate, right? That really it was. I think technically they say it was the British and the Americans that the Japanese surrendered to. or the Russians too, because I guess the Russians get involved with the Soviet Union joins the war on the side of the Allied powers, towards the end, and that's what causes it. I would say, I mean, ultimately, it's the U.S., right? Getting into the war and eventually defeating Japan and dropping 2 atomic bombs. That's really what causes the Japan to surrender and leave China. But obviously, one of the ways that China can sell this point that the Japanese surrender to them is that they actually are considered one of the victorious powers, and that's why they have a veto spot on the UN Security Council. And so I guess there is that there. But it is interesting how they kind of put it that way, just like by the way, they surrendered to us. Their unconditional surrender. Didn't really mention about America's involvement in sort of making that happen. Now, not that I'm polishing my brush buttons. I had nothing to do with it. I was born like 50 years later or whatever, or 30 years. I guess I'm a little bit older than I think. Right? It was 30 years after the end of 35 years after the end of World War II. But anyway, but it was kind of funny how they kind of just left that part out when depicting the end of the movie. I was trying to think. The other thing, of course, too, that they don't really depict is when Japan invades China, and I think Wong Kar Wai does a little bit better job. He kind of alludes to this a little bit better when he makes his movie, that China was not like one big country that gets invaded by the Japanese, but rather they were these sort of warring factions sort of existing in the aftermath of the Manchurian Empire. And Japan kind of was able to sweep in and take over because of those warring factions. It was a little bit easier for them. Again, I don't know, I'm not as up on my Sino-Japanese history or that period, World War II. But that's one area that they don't really mention as much either as well. But I think in terms of depicting the atrocities and that kind of thing, a better movie for that is Yimou Zhang. I'm saying his name right. One of my favorite directors, Yimou Zhang. He did a movie called Flowers of War that had Christian Bale in it. That one is a really, really great movie if you want to check it out. And that kind of depicts those things much better. It's about a brothel in China, and then he plays a missionary, Christian Bale, who comes across this brothel, and he's like sort of helping, and is sort of around the rape of Nanking. He's a part of that. He's pretending that's right. He's pretending to be a missionary. He's not really a missionary, but he's trying to help. There's like a series of girls, young girls that potentially the Japanese army wants to take as prostitutes or sex workers, sex slaves. I guess they wouldn't be workers; they'd be kids. And the women who work at the brothel essentially try to hide and pretend to be these girls so the girls can be rescued to safety. That's how the movie goes. But it's a really, really fantastic one. It actually depicts this stuff a little bit better. So maybe more historically accurate. But that's neither, this does a good enough job of it. And again, it's good enough to create the tension that you want from a story like this. So yeah, there's a lot of pieces there that I just, again, that I think just work really well here. This is not a movie that I would review on the site. I think that's part of the reason why it fits here with the DTVC Extra. In the past, I would do what do you say, like wildcard posts or things like that, that maybe would have a place. A movie like this would have a place, but it made too much in the theater. I mean, it grossed over 22 million worldwide. Wasn't really released theatrically here in the U.S., but it does make a good amount of money. But it's the kind of thing that it's, from an action movie standpoint, it incorporates certain aspects that we just don't see as much in American action movies anymore. And of course, this is 2008, so this is before we get into a period where action movies in America start to get really bad. You think of like that late 2000s period. I'm making this. When I say action, I mean like direct-to-video action, like Dolph movies and stuff like that. When you think about the 2010s for action, that's when, the 2000s to 2010s, that's when, people like Spiro Rosatos really, really get after it, and we get some kind of the more over-the-top, crazy action stuff here. And this movie's not that kind of thing, right? It's got, explosions and those kinds of things, but not really to the same, anywhere near the degree that you would get in a a big blockbuster American action film, but also kind of thinking of like direct to video action as around this time. You get things that have more plot and more padding. And less action and fighting. This does a really great job of making sure that we don't go too long without a martial arts fight scene. And every martial arts fight scene that we get is really, really well choreographed. Again, this is Sammo Hung doing this, so he's not, he's one of the best. And so, when a movie like this has one of the best, you're going to get, and then you got, Donnie Yen, who is just absolutely fantastic in this role. I mean, Donnie Yen, I think part of the reason why I wanted to do this series is I hadn't seen a lot of Donnie Yen stuff, and I've been meaning to. I was looking to see like what I'd even seen of his. Obviously, recently it was John Wick, and I think seeing him in John Wick, I was like, have I seen anything else of his? And that didn't sound right that I wouldn't have seen anything else of his, because I haven't seen either the new XXX movie, Return of Xander Cage, or Rogue One, the Star Wars story. I haven't seen either of those, and he was in both of those films, right? And I hadn't gotten to either of those yet. Probably something that I should see at some point, right? I don't know how people would feel if I did a Star Wars. I was thinking about maybe doing Star Wars on DTVC Extra. I think last year, before I got into doing Fast and Furious, I was thinking about doing it. And what ended up happening was I was trying to do like all of Star Wars chronologically, and I got stuck on the Clone Wars cartoons, and I probably should just not even bothered with them and just kind of just moved on. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll come back and move on. Just kind of just do the movies again. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. But I was looking at it like I guess Hero, right? Hero would have been one. I forgot that he was in Blade 2 and Highlander Endgame, but those are two. So there's that period in like the early 2000s when I would have been seeing more of his stuff. Shanghai Nights. I feel like I saw that one. Owen Wilson. We don't have Ty here to do his Owen Wilson is wow, but that's what that I remember that one being commercial stuff like that. That one has Donnie Yen, and I guess I was trying to think if there's anything else kind of earlier than that that I would have seen him in. I thought back when I was doing Hong Kong films, for my wildcard posts that a lot of them were recommended by Kenner for movies in the attic. I thought I had done one of his movies, but I can't find it on my site anywhere. So because of that, I have to assume that I didn't. But or maybe I was just watching other movies at that time. I mean, one that comes to mind is Once Upon a Time in China 2, which I feel like I've seen that one. Just reading the synopsis, everything about it looks very familiar. I think, and it's possible that maybe I did review it for this, but I don't. I would have seen it in the archive, right? I will find it in the alphabetical archive. It would have been listed in there, and I wasn't. So I don't know if I think the only Once Upon a Time that I had listed was Once Upon a Time in Philly when I was doing my indie reviews there. So and I mean, at this point, I would have probably tagged. I don't know. I wouldn't have tagged Donnie Yen at that point. He wouldn't have gotten a tag then, but now. I probably would. If I was reviewing any of his stuff, I would tag him now. So I mean. He is that good in this role here. He's that fantastic. I mean, he has the it factor, of course, and I mean, he would have it in other things too. But he plays this part so perfectly, which is interesting, right? Because when I go into the Grandmaster later, it's going to be a little bit different. With Tony Leung doing that role. He plays it very differently. It's a very different movie from this, and he plays it very differently from Donnie Yen. But they both do a really great job for different movies for what they're doing. And I think this is a role that he wanted to do when he heard that this movie was in development. He originally they were going to record. They were going to film it in 2008. They had a different idea for a movie that they were going to do in 2008 that was like, I think it was going to encompass both this early period and the Hong Kong period and get into him training Bruce Lee, because that's ultimately where they wanted to get to, was him training Bruce Lee. Ultimately, both of these movies, Ip Man 1 and 2, he doesn't train Bruce Lee. We don't get that far. But that was, I think, their plan was to have that in there. And then I guess production was just cut off early on, and that was it. It never happened. And then Wong Kar Wai was going to make his, the Grandmaster, and that one kind of got stuck in develop. Well, they said it got stuck in production or development hell. I think it was really more Wong Kar Wai just being a perfectionist and just kept wanting to edit it and make it the way he wanted to make it. Also, it was delayed because Tony Leung broke his arm in training, so that also stalled production on it. But in that time period, that's when they released Ip Man. And one of the things too is they were actually going to call it the Grandmaster Ip Man, but it was too close to Wong Kar Wai's movie title, the Grandmaster, and he complained and he was upset about it, and they, you know, truncate or cut the title down to just Ip Man, to have it like that. So yeah, I mean, I was trying to think if there's anything else to get into about this movie. I think again, my key for me is, I mean, you know, again, this is on Tubi. I do think, you know, we're starting to see some of the limitations of Tubi when it comes to this kind of thing, and one is the fact that wanting to watch a movie that's in a foreign language with subtitles, and having the subtitles be completely off and not synced with the audio was difficult, right? It was difficult for both these movies, and I'll see what happens when it comes to the next three if I do the same thing. If I keep, because I prefer watching movies that way. I prefer watching them with the subtitles, and the original audio, just because I feel like I get a better sense of like the drama and how they want to speak. You know, getting the actor's actual voice really helps, and it's not, you know, I've watched so many foreign films in my time that I'm used to the subtitles. And one of the things, of course, being knowing some languages, like, you know, knowing French or German a little bit, it is interesting sometimes when I watch and I see the liberties that are taken with how they translate the subtitles, because, you know, sometimes, you know, like, that's not really how that sounds, or that's not what that is. With the Chinese, obviously, I wouldn't, you know, Mandarin or Cantonese, I wouldn't know if they're doing it right or not. And one of the funny things too about this was that you could see kind of also too in this film, right, the character who's translating for the Japanese with the Chinese, he is playing around with the translations, right? He's in some cases he's not being truthful with the translations. That's something we saw recently with my favorite baseball team, the Boston Red Sox. They have a Spanish English translator who the team hires, and he works with all of the players who speak Spanish as a first language, who need who require that. And one of the biggest players on the team on the Red Sox, Rafael Devers, he was complaining because the team, the ownership wasn't putting any money to the team. They weren't paying to get better players on the team. And he was ranting in Spanish to reporters, and the translator was kind of giving this watered down version of the translation. And one of the radio shows I listen to, they do a TV show out of one of the NBC stations in Boston, and just happens that the Univision is in the same station, a Spanish language channel here in the United States, and they took the audio there, and they were like, yeah, no, he's much more harsh, he's much more critical of the ownership. And then somebody else called in who spoke Spanish as a first language, said the same thing, like essentially that the player was saying, what is the point of all this? What are we doing this for? And essentially saying, like, what's the point of us even playing if you're not going to spend on the team? And the translator didn't say anything like that. We get a little of that in here too. So it's always one of those things, right? Translation's a filter, and it's I guess it's a matter of how you want your filter, right? Do you want do you want somebody else's voice dubbed over it, approximating the language, or do you want to hear their actual voice and then have it written, the filter in a written form, so you at least have the original language, I guess, to hear and juxtapose that with what you're seeing on the screen. But it is, right, it is a filter. I mean, there's certain concepts or terms that don't translate perfectly either, or they could be translated multiple ways that they don't necessarily work. I mean, it's like that with it's interesting because it's like that with English. When you're even with UK English to American English. I always joke that there's no proper American English translation of the UK cheek, right? Like it takes a lot of cheek, or somebody's being cheeky or something like that. And it's funny because there's no proper English, you could say somebody has a lot of nerve, right, when you say they have a lot of cheek, but it doesn't quite come off the same. It doesn't fully fit the concept that I would want there. You think of like French, right, like something like joie de vivre. There's no real American or it's English language version of joie de vivre that works like that. But also too, like I think of like what was it? There's a movie that Alain Delon did with Jane Fonda. I think it was called like Cat something, but I remember she said, "I love you," right? But when she said it, she used the formal vous, right? Je vous aime, I think it was, or je vous. I'm trying to think how it, but when you hear it, right? When you hear it with the formal vous, right, as opposed to the informal tu, it takes on a different meaning. And obviously in American English we got rid of the informal you, right? I guess thou is our informal you, and we just stopped. We only use it either in talking like the Bible, right? When you're talking to God, because I guess you have an informal relationship with God, right? You'd have that sort of a closeness, or if you that informal relationship, that's when you'd use it. Or we have certain expressions that we just sort of have kept over the years, right? Like holier than thou, right? That's an expression that we've just sort of kept. But for the most part, right, we don't use it anymore. So when you're translating, it doesn't come off the right way, or rather, it doesn't fit exactly the situation. So the movie is called the English title for it is The Joy House, but the movie is called Les Felons, which that's where I guess the cats, right? That's where I got the idea of it being the cat house. But so Alain Delon, he plays this like this criminal, kind of petty crook who's kind of seeking refuge in this house with these two wealthy women. So Jane Fonda's the younger one, and she says, instead of saying "je t'aime," she says "je vous aime." But when it's written in the subtitle, it just says I love you, right? Which is, yes, that's what it means. But it's very different to say "je t'aime" versus "je vous aime," right? Because she's showing a formality, like that she sees him as a superior, not superior, but like somebody that she has a formal relationship with. She's essentially calling him sir, right, when she says "je vous aime." So so it's always, I think that's why I like having the original, even though I don't know Chinese on that level. I mean, I can barely make out when they say "Ip Man" in there, and I think I know like "shi shi," I think is thank you. That might be what there isn't much that I know in Chinese, but just being able to hear it helps that way. So we'll see for number 3 and 4 if that changes. But beyond that, beyond the subtitle aspect of it, this is a fantastic movie. I was glad I got to watch it for this. I'm glad, this is part of what I was hoping this DTVC Extra would allow is, for the most part, right, I've been watching things that I've already seen before or most of a series that I've already seen or revisiting things. So to come across something for the first time and use this for that purpose, I think has been good. And at least it's worked out with this very first one. So why don't we take a break here, and we come back, but we'll look at Ip Man 2. It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former Special Forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. All right, we are back, and we're going to start looking at Ip Man 2 here. So this movie picks up where the first one left off. It came out in 2010, I believe, right? So, yes, Ip Man 2, so 2 years after the first one. Donnie Yen did say that he wasn't going to make another one after this because that's when, there's a kind of a proliferation of more Ip Man films. Like, it just sort of becomes because the first one and then the second one are so successful, especially in China and Hong Kong, that it's suddenly everybody wants to make Ip Man movies, right? And if you go on Tubi, I think you'll find a good chunk. Probably not as many as you see like Amityville or some shark movies or something like that. But it'd be interesting it would be kind of interesting to see like if we ever get to that point where it's just like, yeah, Ip Man is as big as Shark Man or sorry, not Shark Man, Shark movies or Amityville movies or something like that. I always that just like everybody's making an Ip Man movie. I'm trying to think of other ones that are like that. I mean, in the UK, right, you've got those Rise of the Foot Soldier movies, right, where it's like everything is based around that massacre of 3 drug dealers, Pat Tate and his cohorts, that they just started making all these movies about them. What's crazy about those, right, is that they have to keep making prequels because they died in the beginning, right, or they die in the first movie, so they have to keep making prequels. While the actors are getting older, they're making movies that take place when they're supposed to be younger, which is really fascinating. I mean, Craig Fairbrass, right? He just keeps getting older and older while he's making these movies, and his characters are getting younger and younger. So, anyway, but yeah, so the Ip Man, but I would say, like, compared to those Rise of the Foot Soldier movies, the Ip Man movies, at least so far, are better quality, right? They're better films, at least in that sense. So with Ip Man 2, again, it picks up right where part 1 leaves off, to the point that they even show us flashbacks, or not, but they kind of get us up to speed by showing us a little bit of what happened in that first movie. And then this one starts where he moves to Hong Kong after the war, and kind of picks up his life from there. So in 1950, Hong Kong, of course, it's controlled by the British. It's a British colony, or I guess it's I don't know if it's considered a colony. I mean, they're colonizers, right? But they're sort of they've sort of leased Hong Kong, right? It's part of that 99-year lease that ended, I think, in 96 or 97. If you remember, Albert Pyun did that movie, right? Hong Kong 97, I think, was the movie that he did. That kind of covered like the last days of of it being a UK territory before it gets switched over to China. And I will say it's interesting watching this, because let me see, Hong Kong 97. Let me just pull it up here. Hong Kong 97. That was a movie. Robert Patrick, Brian James, Ming Na. He's one of the few Ming Na films we've reviewed on the site. But she was good at it. Tim Thomerson, of course, you got to always have him. But so that was kind of depicting sort of as Hong Kong is being transferred from the UK back to China, and a lot of people trying to get out because they don't want to live under communist China. That's kind of what that depiction is. Here it's a little different, right? Here, and again, this movie's made by it has Chinese government involvement, in terms of it being made. They're depicting the occupation differently. It's almost like they're moving from one occupier with the Japanese to another with the British. And of course, there's a character who kind of depicts this sort of like he's exploiting the Brits. When I get to the end of the movie, there's a little bit they have a little bit more nuance than you get in the Japanese look. Though I will say, as much as there isn't, with the Japanese, they are kind of they're depicting them as the bad foreign occupiers that they are. The main character, the general, right? Played by, let me pull up his name again here, sorry, Hiroyuki Ikuchi, playing that General Mura. He does have a bit of sense of, I don't say if humanity is the right word, but he has a sense of honor that's a little bit different from his underling is, kills somebody, just kills him just to kill him. And Mura, chastises him for that. And again, he accepts the fight with Donnie Yen because he wants to show his honor there. So it's not as fully black and white, but for the most part, right? It's not good. And you kind of, it's a little bit different here, I should say, with the British colonists who are running the country. But anyway, what's happened is they're in Hong Kong. They're struggling to make ends meet. Donnie Yen, I think it's his brother, has or a cousin, maybe it's a cousin who runs a newspaper in Hong Kong, and is able to kind of help him out a little bit, gives him a space where he can, open his school, which that's his plan, is he opens a school. What he doesn't realize when he opens the school is that there's a whole kind of cartel in Hong Kong that manages these kinds of things. So Sammo Hung is sort of the head of the cartel of schools, and then he pays money to a guy named Fatso, played by Kent Cheng, who then funnels that money up to a superintendent played by Charles Mayer, who is the UK superintendent, who's essentially, he's corrupt and he's taking this money, he's extorting money from these people. So Donnie Yen refuses to pay the money. He goes and fights the masters to show that he's capable enough, but he doesn't pay the money, and that causes friction with Sammo Hung's crew. But then when Mayer he brings in a boxing champion, a British boxing champion played by Darren Shahlavi, the late Darren Shahlavi. Who the idea is that he is, I don't want to say, he's supposed to be sort of they're showcasing him as this boxing talent, and he's famous, he's a celebrity, but at the same time they're sort of like trying to juxtapose it with what they call Chinese boxing, right, which is kung fu, and sort of trying to show that there's superiority in Western boxing versus Chinese boxing. There's a lot of racism involved, which I think is one of the touches I really liked about that is Darren Shahlavi being of Iranian descent, but also being a British citizen, but being of Iranian descent. Him being, having anti-Asian racism, or being saying, anti-Asian things like that. I want to say it takes the sting out a little bit, right? But knowing that he's of Asian descent too, when he's making some of these comments and things like that, it feels a little, it comes off a little bit better, which I think was a really smart move on their part to have him in there. The other thing too, of course, we know he's a practitioner of Asian martial arts. So I think having him, knowing in real life what the reverence that he had for Asian martial arts, when his character is mocking them and looking down on them and being insulting about all of it, it comes off a little bit better knowing that in real life that's not how he feels. I think, so I appreciate those touches that they had in having him in the film that way. But anyway, he challenges, he's sort of in the ring insulting Chinese people, and he ends up boxing Sammo Hung and kills it in the ring. And so Donnie Yen then challenges Shahlavi sort of to kind of restore not only Sammo Hung's character's honor, but also the honor of all Chinese that are living under the thumb of British imperialism, right? And then in the end, when he does finally beat Shahlavi's character, when that finally happens, he kind of gives a speech about how everybody should come together. We're all human. We all have our own, we all should be treated with dignity, all that kind of thing. And all of the Brits, give him a round of applause. But also, Charles Meyer's boss arrests him for extorting the local citizenry, and so even though as much as it's a black and white kind of thing where they're seen as a foreign occupier, there's a humanity that's shown there that really more like, okay, some of these are just bad eggs amongst them, but otherwise that they're not all bad people. So I thought that was an interesting touch there. I mean, overall, this movie is another solid one, right? It does what you want. It's got the great fight scenes again. Sammo Hung, again, really great at choreographing these fight scenes. I think the build-up with Donnie Yen, again, worked really well. There's some really, really fantastic scenes. I mean, there's one in the fish market that's just absolutely amazing. We get Su Wong Fong back. He plays his character. He reprises his role from the first movie, and he shows up actually to help Ip Man. He's deaf in the ear that he got hit in the broomstick with, from the previous film, but he's there. So that's really good. I mean, Darren Shahlavi, again, I thought that was a really fantastic decision to bring him in. I like that the juxtaposition too of boxing, sort of Western boxing versus Chinese martial arts, and the way that they present it. Obviously Shahlavi's bigger than Donnie Yen, and he's used to using his fists in a way that with the Chinese martial arts, they don't use in the same way. And I think when you look at mixed martial arts, I mean, one of the things about the previous film, right, is they were comparing, karate to, they called it Chinese Kung Fu, but karate to Kung Fu. When you think about it, right, like the Japanese martial art that's the most superior, right, is jiu-jitsu. And of course, Brazilian jiu-jitsu is even more so, right? When you look at mixed martial arts, right? And essentially what it's sort of devolved down into, or I don't know if devolved is the right word, but what's sort of been condensed down into is the disciplines you really need to know if you're going to compete at a high level. It's wrestling and jiu-jitsu, right? So wrestling is the technique of being able to get somebody onto the ground, but then from there, jiu-jitsu is what you use, to be able to get them into holds, to submit them. But then when you're standing, boxing is the key, because boxing, if you've got that ability, the strength is boxing, you can knock somebody out with one punch and end the fight, right? And so boxing is a necessary skill that you either need to be able to prevent yourself from getting punched in the face and getting knocked out, or if you've got that ability to box, if you can prevent yourself from being taken down. You remember Chuck Liddell? I mean, Chuck Liddell. Of course, I'm going back. The sport has evolved quite a bit in the last 15 years or so since Chuck Liddell was a champion, but. Initially he was constantly getting beaten by Randy Couture, who was, Greco-Roman wrestling champ, and would tackle him, and would, hit him with his double leg takedowns were just immense. But then, Chuck Liddell got, he wrestled in college as well, Chuck Liddell. So it wasn't like he came out with no wrestling ability, but he was able to defend takedowns. And then when you fought Tito Ortiz, Tito Ortiz again is another superior fighter, but Liddell could manage, that. And then, he had that one punch knockout ability. Randy Couture talked about what it's like getting knocked out when you're fighting. He said it's not a great experience. Like the next thing you know, you're on the ground. You don't know what happened there. And that's kind of what you get here. Donnie Yen's character is not used to getting knocked out, right? And he gets knocked out by Darren Shahlavi. But boxing as a discipline is a very strong one. It's just with mixed martial arts, right? It's not you need to be able to use your feet. You need to be able to block takedowns. But then, as a strength, boxing is something superior. It's important. Like you don't see kung fu being used much in mixed martial arts, right? You don't see that because, again, like Donnie Yen's character, if you were a big enough guy, you could just tackle. You just get get underneath and tackle. Take a few hits. If you're strong, if you're big enough, once you get that tackle in there, then it's all over, right? That's the end of it. Or if you've got that, like Darren Shahlavi's character, if you got one punch knockout ability, that could be the end of it. Now this fight that happens in this movie is based off a real fight that did happen. It wasn't Ip Man though who had the fight with the Western boxer. It was one of his students. And the boxer was Russian; they weren't a Brit. So there's that there as well. So it's a little bit. It said it was it was a 240-pound Russian boxer in Hong Kong, and his student's name was in the movie. The character's name is Wong Yung. So he's a young fighter, or he's a young kid who is kind of getting into scrapes and fights and things like that. He ends up getting arrested. He's the one who kind of starts the issues with Sammo Hung's character and their fighters. And so and he kind of comes in, you almost think he's Bruce Lee, right? He almost kind of comes in with that kind of swagger. You think like he's going to be the young Bruce Lee, and then you realize time-wise it wouldn't have worked, right? Because he was born in Bruce Lee was born in 1940. This takes place in 1950, so he would have been way too young. So it turns out that wasn't, later in the movie they have a kid show up a 10-year-old Bruce Lee who says he wants to learn to fight, and then he ends up getting trained 6 years later, they say in the credits. But so that they did take this from a real thing. And Wong Chung Leung did beat that boxer. He was able to beat him in that fight. I guess it was 3 punches that he knocked him out. So, and I don't know if maybe he trained to fight the boxer and kind of learned to, because in this movie it's like he's not familiar with Western boxing. Donnie Yen's character, Ip Man, isn't familiar with Western boxing, so he's having trouble with it at first, and how to deal with it. I thought that aspect of it was really good, and I really liked Darren Shahlavi. Again, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. It's crazy to think now that I'm older than he was when he passed. He passed and he's 43, and I'm 45 now. But it's scary to think that you can have a heart attack at that. So I went to a Phillies game the other day. My seats were kind of way up. I picked seats that were like way up in the back because I wanted to just kind of sit by myself and watch the game. And walking up the steps to that, I got myself a beer. And when I got to the top of this, I was like, wow, I can't breathe. I'm completely out. So maybe I need to start taking care of myself a little bit better just because of that. Like keep an eye out. That it's probably a good lesson for all of us. But it is kind of a scary thing to think about, right? That he's not that old. He wasn't that old. He wouldn't be that old now, right? He would just be like 53, which isn't that old either. So very sad. And I think about with Darren Shahlavi, really loved him in Blood Moon. I think there was a thing that we lost him sooner than it looked like he was about to maybe break out. Like you look at some of the roles that he was starting to get, and it looks like they were starting to get better. And maybe he would have gotten some of those starring roles that we would have wanted, or at least maybe more supporting roles than he was getting. So yeah, really sad that we lost him. But this is what he 4 years before he passes. I'm trying to think. This movie comes out in 2010, and he passed in 5 years before he, but not quite 5 years. So you only have 4 more years after this, which is just really kind of scary to think about, and also sad to think about there as well. But I really like that here having him in this, and again, I thought it added some really great nuance. That one, he's also of Asian descent, being of Iranian descent. So the anti-Asian hate that he spews, his character spews, has a different feel to it, knowing that he's Asian as well. I think it's almost like he's kind of channeling, maybe bigotry that he's experienced himself when he was doing it. But then I think also too the sort of dismissive tones that he talks about Chinese martial arts, knowing that he was a practitioner of Chinese martial arts. I think that also. I think that really came off well, and it's something that I really appreciated. Again, Donnie Yen is just fantastic in this. Always really good to see him as well. And I think again, if I needed more of a reason to start watching more of his movies, seeing him here is just fantastic as well. One of the things I forgot to mention in the previous one, I think I was getting ready to talk about it, and then I went off on a tangent about him being in that Star Wars Rogue One and whether I was going to do that one or not. And I think when I came back to him, I missed talking about it. But I discovered he actually spent time in Boston. So He's originally born in, I think it was he's born in China originally. I can't remember, but he lived in Boston for a period, and then I guess he was getting into fights in Boston. He also learned breakdancing in Boston, which is kind of crazy to think about. That's where he develop some of those skills. Because he was getting into fights, his parents sent him to Beijing to train in martial arts when he was maybe he wasn't that old, I guess. So he moved. So he was born in Guangzhou, actually, so close to Hong Kong, and then he moved to Boston when he was 11. And that would have been in the 70s because he's born in 63. So and then I guess maybe so it says he moved to I guess he moved to Beijing. His parents moved him to Beijing. I'm trying to think if he would have been in Boston when I was growing, because obviously I grew up near Boston. If we would have been there at the same time, but I don't know if he was, because I was born in '79. If we would have existed, I feel like he was learning breakdancing. He must have been in Boston in the '80s, right? So he must have lived here by that time. Which is kind of crazy to think, that he would have been close there. So one of the things he talked about spending, it says he spent his nights in Boston's notorious combat zone. That's something I don't know enough about. So of course that's me, being a kid from Maine, I wouldn't know about Boston's combat zone, right? I'm going to Boston to see a Red Sox game, right, or the Bruins game or something like that, Celtics game. I'm going there for the Boston Museum of Science or something like that as a kid, or the aquarium, and then I'm going back to Maine at night. I'm not hanging out in Boston all the time. I had family that lived in Malden, Mass, which is like a suburb just north of there, and I remember they're my mom's cousins. We did a sleepover there, which was interesting. But yeah, so maybe, right, we would have been near each other at some point in the Boston area. But it's just kind of cool to think that he was from, he spent time in Boston. But yeah, he's absolutely fantastic, and I think another good movie, another solid one here that I think works really well. I think the other thing, of course, you can't get outside of the sort of the Chinese political elements here in this, and I don't want to say that the Brits, colonizing and having Hong Kong as a territory was a good or a bad thing. It overall wasn't a good thing. Being controlled by a foreign territory is not a good thing, right? That's just not going to be, that doesn't work well. And I think, United States here, we kind of have similar debates going on, like, for example, with Puerto Rico. Should Puerto Rico become a full state? Should it just be its own country? Should it be allowed to just exist on its own and not be a U.S. territory? Or is it okay kind of how it is, right? What is the best solution there? And I think, even from the people within Puerto Rico, there might be some debate on that. But I think overall, the idea of just sort of being a territory of the United States without any representation in government or any kind of ability to affect their own outcome is not what they want, right? You don't want that. And I think the other thing, too, of course, is that because Puerto Rico is an American territory, there are a lot of things like Americans who can just show up there and buy up land, those kinds of things, create resorts, kind of take the land away from the people that live there. So I think there are a lot of issues. And the other thing too, of course, with Puerto Rico is, like, for example, their baseball team, they compete separate from the United States. They're even though Puerto Rico is a part of America, they are Americans, Puerto Ricans. Their baseball team plays separate. And I think their basketball team as well. They compete separate from the United States. So we kind of have similar, concerns here in the United States. And of course, England, at that time, of course, the English colonialism, right, is something that they're still sort of reckoning with the aftermath of that. But in the 50s and 60s, right, the empire was starting to deteriorate at that point, right? And after World War II, they didn't have the money, but Hong Kong was one that they held on to. When I watch Hong Kong movies that take place in sort of modern times, from the 80s, there isn't the sense so much of, like, the colonial rule, right? And I think, you watch a movie like Hong Kong 97 that Albert Pyun did, there's a sense that, okay, when the Chinese take over from the Brits, it's not going to be a good thing, right? People are trying to escape because they don't want to be stuck under communist Chinese rule. And of course, here in the movie here, they're depicting it differently because the Chinese government wants it to be like, hey, you don't want these foreigners, these outsiders, us in China ruling Hong Kong. That's more of what it's supposed to be. But the amount to which they've diminished Hong Kong's, between the way that they've crushed any kind of dissidents within Hong Kong. I mean, they've removed any kind of democratic expression or anything like that from the people in Hong Kong. I think from Hong Kong's standpoint, what they would have wanted, I think, yes, they're all of Chinese, they're all ethnically Chinese, but I think for them, the outcome they would have wanted when the Brits left was to be able to rule themselves, right? They would have wanted to be like a Singapore individual city-state. That's what would have made them happy. It's not that the Chinese are better, like the way this movie's trying to depict it is like the Chinese are better rulers than the way the Brits are. That's definitely not the case. And I think we're seeing sort of now where Hong Kong financially is starting to suffer. There is no dissidence there. Newspaper, article, anything like that. I mean, the governments there are completely beholden to the Chinese government. And so it's not a good scene there, at least from the reports that I've seen about it. And so this movie sort of trying to depict it in a better way. And of course, this movie comes out about 25 years right after the handover. This is roughly 25 at this point. Actually, am I right? 25 years to the handover, right? Because no. Right now we're 25 years to the handover. This would have been 15 years after the handover. So we're that far at the right, because this was 2010 and the handover was 96, 97. So yeah, we're not quite not quite 15 years at that point. But I think there would have been a sense that at that time, Hong Kong was treated a little bit differently. But, China was starting to assert its dominance there. I don't know, like Macau is another one. That was a Portuguese territory that was given back to China. I don't know if it's a similar situation there as well. Of course, Macau is a little bit different too because of with the gambling and all of that. But I mean, Hong Kong was a real world city for a long time. And I think, what China has done is sort of tried to diminish it so that, Shanghai and Beijing, especially Shanghai, could be, considered, the greater kind of hegemon or, economic power of the region. But, Hong Kong was that. I mean, Hong Kong was, whether, you think of like kind of the economic centers of the world, right? For the U.S. or for the Western Hemisphere, it would be New York. In Europe, right, I think London is still it. I know Frankfurt in Germany was trying to sort of claim that title because Germany overall is a greater economic power than England, but I think the English language piece it was going to play a part there. But then Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong was the major market in Asia. And yeah, I think, China wants that to be Shanghai. And of course, again, Hong Kong had that advantage of being, having the English language advantage as well. Again, with English being the sort of the I don't say lingua franca, but it's it's the number one. It's the international language of business and other things. Having that advantage there. I mean, I think it's one of the things that kind of kept London from being surpassed by Germany. Germany's kind of getting better. Germany's kind of pushing more learning English, but they were kind of behind, I think, other European countries when it came to learning English. So I know I've got a lot of German listeners out there. So maybe you're listening to me in English right now, and you're understanding everything. So you're probably hearing that and being like, what is he talking about? But that was my understanding, at least when I was learning German, that I know my professor had he called her his German lady friend because I didn't think he wanted to call her girlfriend. But he said a lot of times when he would go out with her that her friends didn't speak English. And I know too when I was teaching English, I had a lot of older students that were picking up the language later. So but that's kind of it's almost like this movie sort of trying to depict a different sense of what's happening in Hong Kong, right? That now that we're all back together again in China, now that you're under the umbrella of China, you're no longer under the influence of these Westerners, right? That are treating you so poorly. Now things are better. When it's probably not the case, right? Not so much there. But again, you have to kind of keep that in mind. It's similar to in the previous movie where there's that depiction of that the Japanese surrendered to China at the end of the war, which is not entirely accurate. This is kind of the same thing. It's accurate in the sense of depicting that, yes, that Hong Kong was being controlled by a foreign colonizer in the United Kingdom, right? They were a foreign colonizer for sure. But I think the idea that it's all about, the Chinese taking back over. Again, I think from Hong Kong's standpoint, I think what they would have preferred and what would have been better for them is that instead of sort of the UK just giving them right back to, and I think there was that transitional period where they were kind of their own thing for a bit, but under the Chinese government. But Chinese just sort of over time just asserted more and more control to the point that they really aren't autonomous anymore. And again, they're kind of being diminished, over time. And I think it's going to be interesting to see too from a film standpoint, because Hong Kong's film industry was one of the most vibrant in the world, right? I mean, you think obviously, biggest one's LA, right? LA is probably the biggest, Hollywood. But then, obviously Bollywood was pumping out the most movies for sure. But Hong Kong was definitely a vibrant film area. And, Wong Kar Wai was saying that, well, with Hong Kong sort of being, taken over by China, but that also with more money being available in China and bigger resources, that's actually a good thing, that they can make movies in a bigger way. He was saying that when talking about the Grandmaster, that like, okay, now I can do things that I couldn't do before, which, thinking about Grandmaster compared to his other movies, definitely it feels bigger, and maybe there were more resources there. But, I think, again, we'll kind of see. I'm a little out of touch with the Hong Kong film market, so that's probably something, I was much bigger into it probably around this time, watching more foreign films. So again, directors like Wong Kar Wai, Yuman Young, so, I've kind of gotten out of that a little bit, so maybe I need to go dig in and see, kind of how those movies are going. Now, I did want to kind of quickly transition here to that, the Grandmaster, because I think that that was the film that kind of came out around the same time as these other two, and I when I found out that it was on Tubi, I was like, well, why don't I just watch it? Because I didn't know that the Grandmaster, I'd seen every other film by Wong Kar Wai. He's one of my favorite directors. I think of like the movies that he's done. I mean, I think the most recent one that I had seen before, because I guess the most recent one that he had done before this was My Blueberry Nights, which it was a good movie. It's one that I enjoyed, but he's done like a lot of like short films and commercials and things like that since then. But this was really like his, it was like 6 or 7 years between the two. And I think he had started the Grandmaster in '08. So right around the time that they started making Ip Man. But it was like kind of stuck in what they call, development hell, production hell, but mostly because he was editing it. He wanted it to be right. So they said he started it in '04 when he was doing 2046, which is another really good one. That I think most of his stuff is available on either HBO Max. I think almost everything is on HBO Max or Tubi has some of them as well. Like Tubi has 2046, but his older ones, like his really great ones, like the Chungking Express, In the Mood for Love. Actually, I don't know if In the Mood for Love, that one. Yeah, I think that one's on Max. Days of Being Wild, Tears Go By. I think those are all on Max. The only one that's not available on a streamer, I think, is Ashes of Time. But I think you can rent it on Amazon, which is kind of crazy. Well, my initial thought that I was going to do this past week before Shannon Doherty passed, and I said to do the initial thought on her, was talking about streamers, because I went to go look at what Catherine Bigelow had available, and a movie, The Weight of Water, wasn't available on anything. Forget it wasn't available to rent on any streamers, but also there was no like new DVD version on Amazon. You can only get a used DVD of it. It's like, that was the movie that came out in 2000 with Sean Penn, directed by Catherine Bigelow. How is that not on anything? But at least with Wong Kar Wai, right, everything's available, and you can check it. I think part of it has to do with the Criterion Collection having his older films. They work in conjunction with Max to show some of those, so that's probably part of it. But I mean, he's a really great director. If you haven't seen any Wong Kar Wai stuff, he's definitely a director to get into. And again, he's easier to get into than other directors just because a lot of his stuff's available. But The Grandmaster is one that I've been meaning to see for a long time, and I did check it out on Tubi. I discovered that the version on Tubi is the Weinstein cut, which I didn't know there was a Weinstein cut. I guess the the original version, and I guess there's 3 different versions of the Grandmaster. There's one that was kind of released to Chinese audiences. There's the Berlin Film Festival version, which I think is supposed to be considered the more definitive version. That's the one that he was nominated for Oscars on, and the one that it opened the Berlin Film Festival the year that it came out. And then there's the Weinstein version is like 20 minutes shorter. So like the Berlin Film Festival I think is like 2 hours and 10 minutes. The American version is 1:48 or an hour and 48, and it has like these sort of like intertitles that sort of keep you up to speed with what's happening in case as an American we don't fully know the background. Wong Kar Wai did say that he liked that there was the American version, so I don't know if maybe he had a part in editing it, in putting it together. It's a more linear version of the film, which, to be honest, that's one thing I like about Wong Kar is when he's not doing things in a linear way. But it's a more introspective and philosophical version, but it still has these really great fight scenes. So the fight choreographer is Wu Ping. And so I was trying to think of what other stuff of his I had done. I mean, they're really great scenes. I mean, again, it's Tony Leung Chu Wai is how you say it, full name. And then Ziyi Zhang. Again, I'm having trouble with some of these names here, but she's in it as well. I would put her like probably in a top 10 female action stars list. Because her things like Crouching Tiger, Hero. I believe she was in Hero. Was it the second? What are the? Oh, I can't believe I'm trying to blank on the Rush Hour, the second Rush Hour movie. She's in that as well, but she's really good in this too. I think people are saying that they liked her performance better than Tony Leung. Tony Leung is one of my favorite actors, so I love seeing him in anything. But he's the one who plays Ip Man, and he brings a different kind of style from what Donnie Yen brings, right? But they're still both like total leading men kind of guys. It's much more stylistic with like he's got the hat on. But I mean, it was nominated for it was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Cinematography, and it really is that good. I probably should have had the name of the cinematographer up already here. And of course, one of those things, again, IMDb is just fantastic when it's like when I'm trying to figure out like, okay, I want to be able to get to where the Oscar nominations are. There we go. It's like, I guess part of it has to do with how IMDb is laid out, where it's like it's different for mobile than it is when you're on the website, so it's not always easy to find things either that way. But the cinematographer was Philippe Lessor, who he was nominated for Best Achievement in Cinematography. He didn't win, and then it also was nominated for Best Achievement in Costume Design, William Chang. And it really, I mean, as a period piece, it's all really great stuff. And so I don't know if I would put it up there as like one of my favorites from Wong Kar Wai. It's close, right? I definitely really enjoyed it. But one of the interesting things about it, so it's not, there isn't a sort of like a Chinese propaganda element that colors the other two films. It does kind of take place kind of over the course of the two, the first of the timeline of the Ip Man 1 and 2. So it starts pre Japanese invasion, and then with the Japanese invasion, then he goes to Hong Kong and sort of picks things up there. There's a few elements that they include here that isn't included in the first one. So one is the kind of the disparate factions that are kind of ruling China at that time. There's he kind of depicts it more as like the North and South don't get along. So north of the Yangtze, south of the Yangtze, they're kind of at odds with each other. Of course, none of that's depicted in the first movie, but then, really, thinking of it more like, between the fact that you've got the sort of warring factions after the Manchu Empire falls, but also, of course, the thing they don't mention at all with Ip Man in either in this movie or the other one is that Ip Man was with I'm trying to think of how I want to say it. Kuomintang. I'm trying to say so. The party that was opposed to the Chinese Communist Party. Let me see if I can get. Yeah, they were the ones who Kuomintang. Yeah, who kind of I think they end up kind of fleeing to Taiwan after the the Chinese Communist Party takes over. They flee to Taiwan. So he was part of that party. They kind of don't mention that at all, right? Because they don't really want to mention that. So the Chinese Nationalist Party, the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want really anything to know about that happening, right? And of course, yeah, if you're going to spotlight this character, this person, and try to hold him up as a symbol of Chinese pride, right? You wouldn't want to mention that he's a part of the party that fled to Taiwan that opposed the Communist Party, and also Taiwan, right? They don't even want to acknowledge the existence of Taiwan. So I know even with my company, we have to be careful because we work with a lot of people, a lot of companies in China, a lot of, and work with the Chinese government and stuff, that we have to be careful to refer to it as either Taiwan or Chinese Taipei, right? That's the other expression for it. But anyway, so that neither of them mention that, but I guess Wong Kar Wai's movie is a little bit more mention of the fact that that there was a kind of a warring, that China was not in a good place when the Japanese invade. The other piece that this one mentions that the other one didn't is that when Ip Man goes to Hong Kong, he's there trying to make a living to send money back to his family, to his wife and his kids, and they close the border. China closes the border with Hong Kong, and he's stuck there. He can't get back, so he never sees his wife again. And his wife ends up dying before he ever, and so in this movie, in the Ip Man series, he flees to Hong Kong with his family, and they're all there together, and they're kind of struggling together. Whereas in this, it's a little bit different, and that is where Wong Kar Wai, he kind of sees the opening to develop this sort of relationship between Tony Leung Chiu Wai and Ziyi Zhang. And he kind of creates that element there, which again, in classic Wong Kar Wai style, it's extremely stylistic. The scenes between the two of them are fantastic. The way it's shot is fantastic. It's all really good. I mean, for me as a fan of both action movies and these sort of indie art house films, I can't really compare the two. I think I like them both the same, or for different reasons, I guess. And again, I don't even like Tony Leung is one of my all time favorite actors, and I think Donnie Yen. It's hard for him to compete with that for me, because Tony Leung has years of movies that I've just really enjoyed with him in it. It would be hard for me to write to for Donnie Yen to compete with that, But Donnie Yen is just so fantastic as well. Just from, as an action film fan, he's just, you have to appreciate what Donnie Yen is doing in those movies. So I really like that as well. Interesting enough, I didn't realize that Tony Leung is only a year older than Donnie Yen. So I always think of him as being older than that, but he's really not. I think of some of the movies. I mean, recently I think I saw him in The Red Cliff that John Woo did, which was really great. But I just think it was like a lot of the movies that he did. Obviously, he did Lust Caution with Ang Lee, so he's also worked with Ang Lee as well as Wong Kar Wai and John Woo and Yimon Zhang. He's worked with all the big names, and he's just he's there. I mean, just thinking of like actors, I was trying to think of like who I would compare Tony Leung to in America, because he's just so great. I mean, he's got that leading man presence of like a George Clooney or somebody like that, but then like from an acting skills ability, it's like another level on top of that. He was in Hero as well. I forgot about that. But anyway, I'm kind of going off on a big tangent on him. But he's another actor, just like I'm saying Wong Kar Wai is a director, that if you haven't checked out his stuff, Tony Leung is he's an actor that you really should see more of if you're not familiar with him. He's just great. And of course, Ziyi Zhang, again, as I mentioned before, I think she's definitely in top 10 female action stars. I mean, for me, my top three, with Pam Grier, Michelle Yeoh, and Cynthia Rothrock, I feel like that's kind of a level. And then I think Ziyi Zhang is kind of that next tier down, with names like Zoe Saldana, Mila Jovovich, some of those names that have kind of done a lot of big stuff. She's in that category there for me. But really, really fantastic here. Again, it's a different kind of thing from the Ip Man film, but I mean, the martial arts is still fantastic. Having Wu Ping do the martial arts films, and I was trying to think of what other stuff I'd seen him in. When I looked it up on IMDb, I mean, it's I don't say it's it's a lot of great stuff. I mean, obviously, Man of Tai Chi was one that I believe is in the archives that I did with the guys from Comeuppance. It was their second time on the show back in like 2014 or 2015. So that was one that I'd covered. I was like, okay, I remember that one. And then Kill Bill, right? He worked on the Kill Bill movies. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, obviously, big one. Black Mask. I mean, I can go through and name them all. I mean, just tons of stuff. I was trying to think if he'd done anything that ended up on the site, and but he didn't. Like, there aren't any direct-to-video, like ones that kind of end up in the direct-to-video realm. But one of the things is he takes over for Sammo Hung and does the final two Ip Man films. He's the action director for those, so he kind of comes in after that. So when we do the next two movies, it'll be more Wu Ping. But great name that was involved in the Grandmaster. And I mean, Tony Leung is he's not Donnie Yen, but they look fantastic enough. He does it. He really trained. He's like kind of not John Wick, like Keanu Reeves, right? Training for the John Wick movies. He really trained hard to do these. He broke his arm. I think they said he broke his arm twice, 2 separate times. Of course, which stalled production as well. But yeah, it's really good stuff. Also, Kung Lee is in this movie, which remember him. I think it was Dragon Eyes was the movie he did with Van Damme, and then Puncture Wounds was the film that he did with Dolph. So he's been on the site a couple times, but he's in this. I believe he had more scenes, but they were cut. They were edited down in the American version, so I'm not sure. I mean, according to Wong Kar Wai, or the rumor is that there was like 4 hours worth of footage that he was just trying to find and edit the way he wanted to. He said, I don't want this to be a 4-hour movie. I want it to be a 2-hour movie. In his mind, the 2 hour, 10 minutes is perfect, but he liked the slightly slimmer version of the American one as well. He liked the idea, I guess, of having multiple versions out there, but I've got to kind of find a way probably to get that 2 hour and 10 minute version, because it doesn't look like it's available on any kind of streaming. I'd probably have to get the DVD version of it to see that, but definitely something I want to check out, because again, the Grandmaster was really good. You can check that one out on Tubi. Unlike the Ip Man films, the subtitles sync up better, and I think for sure, you should only be doing subtitles with that one. I think it's only available with subtitles. I don't think there is a dubbed version of that movie, because again, Wong Kar Wai, he's a big deal. So he's an indie art house kind of guy. He's someone that you don't dub his movies. You watch them in the original language with subtitles. But it is that good. Definitely worth checking out. So so far we're 2 for 2 with the Ip Man films, and I'm looking forward to 3 and 4, which we'll be doing in 2 weeks. But what we'll do now, we'll take a break, and then when we come back, I'm going to talk about Wonder Woman 84. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. All right, we are back, and we're going to wrap up here with this. Just some thoughts on Wonder Woman 84, which I saw recently. So it's been very hot here in Philadelphia, close to 100 degrees, or for people that are outside the United States, at 38, 39 Celsius. That's about what's been pushing during the day. So it's not always easy to go out, though. To be honest, I'm starting to get used to it more, and I'm just like, the hell with it, I'm just going to go out. It doesn't matter. But for the most part, I'm kind of staying inside and trying to sort of just stay in the air conditioning and do that. And so I can't remember what prompted this. I was looking at I was looking for movies to watch, and I was looking at kind of where I was in the DC extended universe, like how, where I was next in terms of watching those movies. And so I had seen up through the Birds of Prey movie, which why that was called it had like the word fantabulous in the title. It should just been called Birds of Prey, or Harley Quinn's Birds of Prey, but it's something about fantabulous emancipation or whatever. So, but that was the one I'd seen last out of those movies. I think I'd gone back and caught some that I had missed before, like Man of Steel. But anyway, so the next one for me was Wonder Woman 84. So I wanted to watch that, and then I also saw that Professor Marsden and the Wonder Women was on Tubi. And so I thought, well, maybe I could kind of get some insight, too, on just how Wonder Woman was created and get a better sense for that. Because one of the things about Wonder Woman 1984 is that I heard a lot of bad things about it. And I kind of enjoyed the first Wonder Woman movie. And so I was curious if all of the kind of the vitriol against the film was warranted. It's one of those ones when I go on log it on Letterboxd, not IMDb. When I log it on Letterboxd, the people that I follow on Letterboxd, the reviews run the gamut, right? You see some 2 stars in there, you see some 4 stars in there, and so some people did enjoy it, some people were not fans. So I was curious. I was kind of curious, kind of all around. One of the interesting things about Wonder Woman that I was thinking about as we get into discussing it more is, I was trying to think between the 2 comic book companies, DC and Marvel, like who their top 3 names are, and I think with DC, I think it's pretty cut and dry that Batman's number 1, and originally Superman was number one and Batman's passed Superman, but I think Superman's a clear number two. I think Wonder Woman is the clear number three. I think when you think of those, I think after that you can kind of, you Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman. I think kind of maybe had a little bit of a resurgence with the Jason Momoa. Obviously Arrow with the Arrow TV show. I think Green Arrow has kind of moved up a little bit as well. But I think those three are pretty close. And I think with Marvel it's a little different because it's like I think Spider-Man is the clear number one. And then, I mean, for number two, is it Wolverine next? Probably. I know Rob Liefeld, when he created Deadpool and Cable, he said the reason why he created Deadpool and Cable is because everybody wanted to use Spider-Man and Wolverine in their books, and they weren't allowed to. Marvel limited who could use them. So he's like, I'm going to create my own Spider-Man and Wolverine with Deadpool and Cable. And, Deadpool, I think you can make a case might be the number three. Iron Man, I think, surged up there as well. I mean, I think for most of my life, I think the number three was Hulk. I think it was, and I think Wolverine was someone who kind of, he surged in the 80s. I think when I was a kid, it would have been probably Spider-Man, Captain America, Hulk. And then I think Wolverine kind of supplants Captain America, but I think Hulk was still there. And then I think Deadpool... Maybe Iron Man supplants Hulk first and then Deadpool. I don't know. I'm sure people listening probably have other ideas too of names that were in there. But the one thing you could say, right, is that none of them, right, there's no a female character that's the clear number three, the way it is with DC. And so it's interesting, right, that, it took so long, one, to have a film adaptation of Wonder Woman. There was a TV show in the late 70s. And that TV show in the late 70s was interesting because it had a bit of the Batman camp to it. It played on some of the bondage themes that the show's or the character's creator, Marston, that he wanted in the original, which you find out more when you watch that movie, when you watch Professor Marsden and the Wonder Woman, that he wanted more of that in there, and I think the show played on those themes a little bit more, but. It also had the female empowerment element, right, of Wonder Woman, and so it kind of worked together on those veins. But I think ultimately, probably the camp part of it may have hurt it too. Unfortunately, I mean, when you see Linda Carter, for me, Linda Carter is and always will be Wonder Woman, and I think that's one of the interesting things. Like when you think of Batman, where I don't think Adam West is the definitive Batman. He's my favorite Batman, but I don't think you could say it's Adam West and that's it. Nobody else can touch it, right? Whereas Linda Carter is firmly, I think, Gal Gadot is more like borrowing Wonder Woman, from Linda Carter. But Linda Carter is so definitively that. Same with Superman, right? Christopher Reeves is definitively Superman, and they just haven't really been able to pull that off with either Henry Cavill or Brandon Routh. And it'll be interesting to see what they do. I've heard, I guess now Alan Richardson's supposed to be the Batman, which again, it's interesting that Batman, kind of anybody can play him, and it works, doesn't work, but it's not like there's like a one, where you're like, no, nobody else is doing this, I think you can make your cases for Michael Keaton, for Christian Bale, now, Ben Affleck, now Robert Pattinson, whereas with these other ones, it's so definitive that it's like, they're sort of in the shadow of that other one. And I think if Linda Carter's so gracious that she wouldn't want Gal Gadot to feel like she's in her shadow, but I think you go back, that show's on Max now. If you go back and watch some of that, those episodes on Max of the old Wonder Woman show, she's just a presence. She just is amazing in that role. So anyway, so it took a while before they had a film adaptation of their number three star. But I think when you look at DC's approach to movies overall, it's not so crazy. It's not so far-fetched, right? Because... You really, for the longest time, they were just it was just Superman, and then it was just Batman, right? And it's only with Marvel pushing the envelope with the Marvel Cinematic Universe that DC was like, oh, boy, we really need to start exploring these other characters that we have here, because it's not good enough anymore to just do Batman or just do Superman. Because if you look, right, if you go back through sort of the history of it, right, that... when it was just Superman, right? They were the only game in town with just Superman, and they were making that money off of Superman. And then Superman falters in the '80s, especially with the canon Superman 4. But then they have found gold with Batman. And I don't think they were expecting that Batman to be the hit that it was, but it was, right? And so and that kind of transformed everything for them. Batman was almost like a separate entity outside of the rest of the DC universe. But they were like, we're doing well enough with his, with those movies. And then, they're kind of tried to bring Superman back again with the Superman Returns movie, because at that point, Batman had kind of faltered a bit. And then Batman's coming back with the Batman Begins with the Christopher Nolan movies. And again, you get the Dark Knight that pulls in $1 billion, and it's kind of like, okay, well, what's the point of us putting in a bunch of money for other characters? They tried it, right? They tried it with Green Lantern, and it didn't come off. And so I think there was a sense of like, well, what's the point? But then when you go between the Dark Knight and the Dark Knight Rises, and you go from Iron Man with the Dark Knight to the Avengers and Dark Knight Rises, and suddenly Avengers has sort of passed DC, right? And they were left in the dust there. They're like, oh, they were scrambling to kind of make it happen. And so it's like, okay, well, now we've got to adapt Wonder Woman, right? We can't sit by and because we want to have a Justice League, and if we're going to have a Justice League to compete with the Avengers, you can't have that without Wonder Woman. So they bring in Wonder Woman, right, in the was it Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice, which I had read that they had a few different ideas for how they wanted that second Superman movie to be. But again, when they see what happens with the Avengers, it's like, okay, we don't have any choice here. We've got to, so they decided to make Batman the villain of the second Superman movie, and in that they bring in Wonder Woman into that film and introduce her as well. And it works, right? Because, that Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice, I think that was their best movie that wasn't a Dark Knight, Batman, that was, their best movie that wasn't one of those Batman Dark Knight things or just the plain, the earlier Superman ones. It does, almost $900 million. And so at that point, they realized they had something. The Suicide Squad movie does really well. Later on that year, like in August of 2016, that one did really well. I don't think they were expecting that one to do as well as it did. So I think they thought, okay, we've got something here. And sure enough, Wonder Woman, that Wonder Woman in 2017 was huge, right? And I think there was a sense that, like, okay, this is working. We've got something here, and this is going to go. Granted, Justice League didn't do as well. And when you watch that Justice League movie, I can see why it didn't do as well. It did well enough, but for a $300 million movie, it only makes $660 million. I think there was a sense of like, okay, we got to maybe regroup and make this work again. And Aquaman, of course, becomes the biggest one out of all of those, right? And even Shazam, I think the problem with Shazam is that it does well enough, right? It was a successful movie, but it was also cut off from the rest of the DC universe. I think there was supposed to be a Henry Cavill guest appearance in there, but it doesn't happen. But anyway, Shazam does well enough, and then that Birds of Prey movie doesn't do well. And again, I think that maybe it wasn't marketed well. The title is just alone was obnoxious, right? Just call it, Harley Quinn's Birds of Prey or whatever. But the Fantabulous, whatever, Emancipation, it was just like, it was weird. And then, of course, the pandemic hits, and they didn't know what to do with Wonder Woman 1984. They weren't sure what the best play was, so they came up with this sort of hybrid approach where it's going to be in the theater because theaters are starting to open up again, but they aren't fully open, especially in big cities, especially in Northeast cities like where I live. They just weren't really fans of spreading COVID everywhere, like the way that in Florida and Texas they loved spreading COVID. It was just kind of a fun thing. So those big cities, you could go into a full theater and get all the COVID you wanted. In the Northeast, they're kind of like, we prefer our hospitals to not be overrun. We don't want everybody dying. So let's kind of make it fewer people in the theater. So they're like, okay, well, we're not going to make the money we would make off that, but what if we do a hybrid thing and maybe we get more HBO Max subscriptions, which did work, right? They did get those subscriptions, but I don't know how you quantify that properly. And again, it wasn't a big box office hit there, but it did get, a lot of people subscribed to HBO Max just because they wanted to see Wonder Woman 1984. They wanted to be able to see it on there. So it did help in that sense. But as a movie, I'm watching it and I'm like, the first movie had a little bit more of an identity. Yes, it definitely felt like it was biting on Captain America: First Avenger, the setting in World War I, which it was weird that it was set in World War I when the other stuff was set in World War II. The villain as Ares, for me, I guess maybe not as well known a Wonder Woman enemy, but he was a Wonder Woman enemy, so I guess you could have them. They bring Cheetah into this movie here, but yeah, this movie was it was weird. It was like, one, the whole thing of bringing Christopher Pine back, because there's like a device that gives people wishes, and so that's how you bring Christopher Pine back, is she makes a wish, and then Christopher Pine's able to just fly like a modern aircraft after not having flown since World War I, but yet he's not comfortable with trash cans, right? Plastic trash cans make no sense to him, but he can fly. There were things like that happening in the movie that just didn't come off well. I think also from a development, character development standpoint, I think they just weren't sure what to do with Wonder Woman, and they're still kind of trying to figure out how to work it. Like, she's strong female character, and I think they did a better job in the first movie of it. But when you watch the old show, it seems like they had a better sense of how to, I shouldn't say that, because the old show, it seems like they're almost kind of flipping the trope of the damsel in distress, where it's always Steve Trevor getting captured and needing to get rescued by Wonder Woman. That's kind of not exactly what you want either. You don't want her just, always rescuing Steve Trevor. But I think there was a thing too where, like, Steve Trevor, he's such a big part of Wonder Woman that when they killed him off in the first movie, they were like, well, we gotta. They felt like I think they felt like they had to bring him back somehow, and so there's that wish thing. Kristen Wiig, I think, as the cheetah would have been good, but we don't get a lot of her as the cheetah. It's sort of developed as the movie goes on, and we only get twice that she fights Wonder Woman, which is kind of a waste. The other villain, of course, is played by Pedro Pascal, and he's playing the character of Maxwell Lord, who, my understanding in the comic books was that he was someone who could control other people's minds. And actually, he gets killed by Wonder Woman because he's trying to tell Superman, he's controlling Superman's mind to kill Batman. And, I think Wonder Woman has to kill him, has to break his neck to get him to not do that. In this, instead, he's like the wish granter. He essentially makes himself the wish granter. And so he's like controlling the world by, like, giving everybody their wishes, because when he... The catch to the wish thing is that if you grant somebody's wish, you take the most important thing from them. So, for example, with Wonder Woman, to get Chris Pine back, to have Steve Trevor back in her life, she loses her powers. And as the movie's going on, she's realizing she's losing her powers more. And she has to essentially renounce her wish, which it's funny, she just says, I renounce my wish, and then I guess Chris Pine disappears, and that's it. And then, she's got her powers again, which was, I don't know. It was a kind of a hokey thing. It was all a little bit on the hokey side, how that kind of stuff played out. There was some talk about that, because the way they bring Chris Pine's character back is that he essentially is in the body of another guy who's living in 1984, and so people were talking about the fact that when they have sex, that this body that Chris Pine is inhabiting essentially was having sex against his will. And I guess it kind of makes sense. For me, it's like, why would you even need to bother with any of that? Like, why is it Chris Pine is coming back to life, but in somebody else's body? Why isn't he just coming back to life and just being his own thing? If the thing can grant wishes, can't it just create another person out of thin air and have them be alive again? I don't know. I don't know why they needed to make that element in there. Again, all of it didn't seem like it was all that well thought out. It didn't seem to work that well. I was trying to think, like, going based off the Professor Marsden character, where there's a lot of elements in there that we haven't seen in Wonder Woman. I know, obviously there's the part that she might be either, gay or at least into both men and women. And Gal Gadot had talked about that her, she felt that Wonder Woman was, at least, attracted to women, or at least wanted to be with women as well as men. And that's something that's never really been explored in Wonder Woman. And I think that could have been something that could have been really well explored. Like maybe, another woman, whether there's, I think it's Donna Troy, I think is like kind of the younger Wonder Woman character that was like, work with her. There were other women from Amazon who took the Wonder Woman mantle. It would have been interesting if one of them came to America in the 80s and she's training them or something like that, and they sort of have a romance while she's still pining over, no pun intended, Chris Pine, right? That could have been interesting. But again, like, how would that have worked, right? How would you make that work in a modern movie? Because one, from a male gaze mindset, right? They would be wanting to see Gal Gadot hooking up with another woman, right? So how do you make it so it's not that kind of, unseemly thing? How do you make it more of a more natural LGBTQ story? Also with these blockbuster movies, I think there's a fear of not just having, cis het relationships, and so we, instead of having, Gal Gadot or having Diana Prince as Wonder Woman, having a relationship with another woman in the movie, right? We've got to come up with some fugazi device to bring Chris Pine back so she can have that relationship with him, and we can see that through her there. It would have been interesting to see if they did something more creative, because that kind of thing was a kind of a bit of a muddled mess. I mean, I think had they had Kristen Wiig, because she gets her powers through this wish thing as well, because she wishes she could be more like Wonder Woman, or more like Diana Prince, or I don't remember, and doesn't realize like that. Oh, that means she's getting special powers, right? That she's getting stronger. But I think it would have been interesting if they had done more to kind of to make this her character as the Cheetah. Instead of having it be like she develops these powers as the movie goes on, what if she's just there? She's just there causing problems, and Wonder Woman's got to fight her from the very beginning. It would have been interesting. There's this other piece of it, I think, with the fact that you've got Pedro Pascal's character. That there's this thing that seems to happen with these movies, that when you go from a part one to a part two, you've got to add villains, right? And I feel like I feel like Batman started that with Batman Returns, right, where they did the Penguin and Catwoman, and it seems like this happens with a lot of these ones, that you can't just have one baddie, you've got to have two baddies when you do the second movie. I don't know that you needed that. You could have just had one. You could have just had her as Kirsten Wiig as the Cheetah, and done something different there. I mean, usually the second movie's the better movie though, as well, right? With these films, like that, it's where the series starts to hit its stride. And the fact that they didn't quite hit their stride here, I think was a little bit of disappointment. I mean, I don't know if this movie is horrible. I don't know. Between the 2 and the 3 stars, I was talking to Ty about it, and I was like, from a 5-star movie standpoint, maybe 2.5 stars. Because I think there's a threshold there when you go from 2.5 to 3, that 3 means you like it, and 2.5 means you're kind of on the fence. And I think I'm kind of more on the fence about it. Like, I think like some of the other cinematic universe movies, DC extended, or whatever they call it, universe. I liked Shazam better. I liked Aquaman better. I liked the first Wonder Woman better, right, than this one. So I definitely movies that I kind of put this on the lower rung. Of course, I'm trying to think if I've seen any of them after this one, and I don't think I have. So I haven't seen the new Suicide Squad. I haven't seen Black Adam or the second Shazam. I haven't seen any of them. So I'd have to kind of start looking at them and watching them. But I think out of the ones I had seen to this point, like for example, I liked the Birds of Prey movie. I actually enjoyed that one. So I know not as many people did, but I liked it. So I would put this one below that one for sure. And maybe the Justice League one. Maybe I would put the Justice League one below this one. I haven't seen the 4-hour version yet, so maybe I need to see the 4-hour version. The thing I didn't like about that other one was that it was just like, let's wait for Superman to come back and save the day, right? It was just like, we're just going to kind of hold down the fort until Superman shows up, and then suddenly, we're gonna win everything. And that's kind of useless. That's kind of like what the old TV show was like, right? It's like, there's trouble, and suddenly, Superman shows up and saves the day. Or like, the old Wonder Woman show, right? Like, she there's trouble and she shows up and she fixes everything. That's kind of what that movie was. And you kind of want something a little more from a $300 million movie. But, and I guess the question now is like, what are they going to do with Wonder Woman from here, right? Because they've essentially decided they're not going to use Gal Gadot for the James Gunn movies. They're going to have Wonder Woman, right? I think that's just, it's going to be... you can't do a DC universe without Wonder Woman. She is, for my money, she is the number 3 comic book character from DC, and I think the number 4 would be Green Lantern. I know, like my nephew, it reads Green Lantern comics. I think for younger readers, they're fans of Green Lantern. I remember when I did my teaching English as a foreign language certificate program, one of the younger guys that was doing that course with me, he was, he'd go around the corner and grab a Green Lantern comic and come back when we were on our break or whatever. So, I think that he's more Green Lantern overall, I think in the Green Lantern Corps and the different characters, I think, but Hal Jordan's Green Lantern, I think you'd put him maybe as the number 4, and they've got to figure that one out too, right? Because they did that movie, that movie didn't come off well at all, the 2011 movie, and they didn't end up putting him in the extended universe. They ended up scrapping it before they could get him back involved with that. So that's something they've got to fix as well. I think with Wonder Woman, I don't know. When I was reading about what they had planned for Wonder Woman, I almost feel like it would have gone south anyway. They were planning on doing a 3rd movie and then like some kind of spin-off like Amazonian characters movie. That I don't think we need any of that either. I think it would be nice if they go back to what made the TV show work. And maybe I don't know I don't know that you can go back to what, watching that Professor Marsden and the Wonder Woman movie. The one thing I kind of got from that is I don't think you could make Wonder Woman the way he intended Wonder Woman to be nowadays. I don't know that would work, which I think is kind of too bad. It's kind of a too bad thing to think that, and I don't, the movie, I don't know how accurate the movie is depicting everything. It sounded like it was done with the input from the family. But I don't know how much, how realistic it was. But for what he wanted Wonder Woman to be, I don't think you could make that even today. And I think that would probably upset him that 80 years later, we're still kind of in a place where Wonder Woman, it's like for example the BDSM elements of the original comic that he wanted in there that kind of get removed, right? And when you watch this movie, you find out that they when he passes away, they just kind of strip all of that out of Wonder Woman. They also remove her powers until Gloria Steinem complains that they removed her powers and they give her powers back to her. But when they bring her powers back, they still get rid of any of those kind of those bondage elements. The TV show has a little bit of it, kind of more as a way to have fun. But I don't think you could make a movie today, like especially a blockbuster style thing that one has those kind of elements. I don't think you could make a blockbuster today either that has her engaging in lesbian romances, which again that was another piece that he wanted in the comic books. That was another element that he was like, because in his mind it's kind of more about just I guess polyamory, but the idea, like, because the way they described the relationship that he was in, right, was that he and his wife, there's a research assistant who comes with them, and the research assistant actually falls in love more with his wife than with him. And so they kind of live in this relationship where he's hooking up with both women, but they're also hooking up with each other. And I don't think you could make a blockbuster. I think we're still kind of, especially with the way blockbusters are made, where they're these big tentpole kind of things, that you could make that movie today the way he intended it, which is kind of too bad. I think the Wonder Woman as he envisioned it, it would be interesting to see if we could ever have that version. I think a TV show, right, like HBO Max, right, if they could create a TV show that deals with those kinds of elements, and probably could pull it off and make it really good. But I think from DC's standpoint, right, they see the potential in Wonder Woman, right? Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman movie made, almost $825 million on a budget of $149 million. So there's money there. And I think there's a sense that, we could potentially do like what the first Captain Marvel movie did and breach $1 billion, right? That's the potential for Wonder Woman. And if you make her character, hooking up with other women, and if you have this strong BDSM element in it, that's not a $1 billion earner, right? You need to just follow all of the standard tropes of the male dominated action movie and just swap them out for a female character and just put it on the screen there with a huge budget and a lot of special effects, and that's really what that's what they're going to want to do, I think. It would be interesting to see. I mean, the other thing I think that kind of struck me about this, watching Wonder Woman 84, but also, Professor Marsden and the Wonder Woman, and just kind of looking into DC overall, is that DC has really great characters. And it feels like you should be able to make blockbusters out of all of them all the time, constantly. You should just be pumping out, $750 million movies all the time. And I think, again, DC got comfortable with the fact that they were able to do it with either just Superman or Batman, and they didn't need to use any of the other characters, that it wasn't necessary. They were making cartoons with them, the animated movies that were working. And I think Marvel was the one that pushed it and said, no, you don't have any choice, because, if you want to get to where we are, you got to start using more of your characters. I think also, too, I think they saw that Marvel was making money with characters like Iron Man. They saw that as potential money for themselves, and were like, well, why? We've got all these characters here. We should be making 2 movies a year that are pulling in a lot of money. And so I think they're always going to want to see that as the potential now. Now that they've opened that door, it's like they've got to do it. And I think with Wonder Woman, initially I would look at Wonder Woman and say, well, why aren't they making Wonder Woman, right? Like, how can you go from the 70s TV show to nothing until 2017, right? Like, why wasn't there an 80s Wonder Woman movie or a 90s Wonder Woman movie, or early 2000s Wonder Woman movie? Like, what was DC dragging their feet so long? But now, after seeing Professor Marsden and the Wonder Woman and watching Wonder Woman 84, I can see that it's not as easy to make Wonder Woman, right? Like, Captain Marvel's maybe a little bit more straight ahead and easier as a hero, but Wonder Woman has all these other themes tied into her, from her creation that, again, 80 years later, they aren't, how do I say, they aren't as they're still not mainstream, right? And they're not the kind of big tentpole things that big Hollywood is looking for when they're adapting a comic book movie. And so, I think Wonder Woman 84 drove home to me how much easier it is to make a bad Wonder Woman movie than it is to make a good one. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to kind of see where it goes from here. But, again, Wonder Woman 84, I don't want to say it was a bad movie. It was okay, right? And I guess when you're spending $200 million, just kind of like I was saying with the Marvels that last fall, when you're spending $200 million to make a blockbuster that the previous film in the series made, almost 825 million, right? You want this one to make that much money as well. And yes, it was hurt by the fact that it was released simultaneously on streaming, and that's something that they would have wanted to fix. But I think even if the theaters were open at that time, if this wasn't a pandemic, I don't know that this movie pulls what the first one did. Yes, it would have done better than 169 million, but how much better? When you look at the movies that come after it, after Wonder Woman, like none of them really do that well. I mean, Black Adam makes almost 400 million, on a budget of 260 million. I mean, it's just bloated movie. It's just like what they were doing there with that. And so they weren't making good decisions either. And I think that's why they turned the whole thing over to James Gunn to say, fix it for us. And we'll see if he does. But looking at this movie, I don't think this movie probably does more than 500 million in the theater. And when you have a budget of 200 million, you're expecting a lot more return for that. And so, yeah, I don't know, and I don't know. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened with the third and fourth movie if they'd gotten there with Wonder Woman. And I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens with her. Going forward with the James Gunn series, but. That movie, The Professor Marsden and the Wonder Woman, that was a really fun movie in the sense that it gave a lot of insight into sort of where that character comes from. What Professor Marsden was what William Marston was looking for in that character, and it's unique in the sense that she became so popular. That when DC starts publishing, her stories, she becomes one of the most popular books really quickly, and she's right there with Batman and Superman, and she kind of immediately kind of asserts herself, and I think to some extent she might have even been bigger than them when in that initial run. Now, granted, kids were kind of like intrigued by what they were seeing in those comic books. They'd never really seen material like that before, and again, kind of mainstream society was just starting to put their foot down on comic books. It was kind of initially kind of seen as sort of like an outlier thing, and then when they became so popular, it was like, oh, well, we've got to come in and they started creating things like the Comics Code and stuff like that. But it is an interesting vibe, and I think the other thing too, of course, is my wife and I would watch this show called Seeking Sister Wives. It's it's a Discovery show, or it's a TLC show. So actually, they go Warner Brothers Discovery, right? They own the rights to that too. Watching that show when they would talk about like kind of bringing in a second or third wife into scenarios, because it was almost always what it was. I think there was, it was almost always, the husband wanting an extra wife, wanting more than one wife, and it's always depicted in this way, or it's always comes off in this way that's like this guy just wants to hook up with more women. He wants to essentially cheat on his wife, but wants it to be like legitimate, and he sort of manipulates his wife into agreeing to this sort of this scenario. It's a little bit different here because Rebecca Hall as the wife of William Marsden, who's played by Luke Evans. When this other woman, the second wife or the second woman comes in, who's played by Bella Heathcote, she's kind of just like if you got to cheat on me, you got to cheat on me, almost like trying to be like kind of modern about the cheating or something like that. And when the character played by Bella Heathcote professes her love to Rebecca Hall's character, it sort of changes the dynamic there, right? That's like, oh no, actually you're the one I wanted to hook up with. And you wonder too, to some extent, if maybe like she was just her character, or, the woman in real life, if she was really just gay and just had a thing for the wife. And really wasn't interested in Luke Evans' character, but kind of with society being what it was back then, maybe it was better to have that, or maybe who knows, maybe her feelings were conflicted. But when that part of it happens, that's not really something that you see in the Seeking Sister Wives show that I watch, right? When it's again there isn't sort of an element of the women all having a relationship together as well. So there's something kind of more again that concept of polyamory. It's kind of stronger here, and it would be interesting to see if Wonder Woman, in future iterations, explores some of those things. But again, I don't think movies, a big Hollywood movie, is where you explore it now. Right now, you're exploring these kinds of things on TV shows, and so and maybe that's the thing. Maybe here I am all this time saying like, oh, how come there isn't a big screen adaptation of Wonder Woman? You gotta have a big screen adaptation of Wonder Woman. Maybe the TV show is the key. Like maybe you need to have prestige TV, right? That's where Wonder Woman belongs now. You need prestige writers, actors that a cast and crew, the kind of thing. It needs to be something like The Bear, right? It needs to be The Sopranos. That's probably what the best thing is for Wonder Woman, which I never would have thought. And again, I like that first movie, and I think you can do more blockbusters that are like that first movie that do well enough. But I kind of feel like to get to the full extent of what William Marston wanted for Wonder Woman, the best place for it nowadays is probably prestige TV, and it would be interesting to see if somebody did it the way that he wanted Wonder Woman to be, what that would look like. So anyway, and speaking of The Bear, right? Professor Marsden, the Wonder Woman, has Oliver Platt as sort of like the head of DC, who's like enjoying that they're making a lot of money, but angry about the controversy that comes with it. So it's interesting, right? It's a good watch. I think it's a fun watch. It's on Tubi as well. So and I guess actually the Wonder Woman movies are both Wonder Woman movies are on Tubi now, so you can check those out as well. But yeah, Wonder Woman 84. It's not what I would have wanted for a sequel to the first Wonder Woman movie. Even if we're going to kind of go straight ahead and kind of keep working off of how good that would. Again, another thing I guess you could come to is if you're comparing the first Wonder Woman to Captain America: First Avenger, right? When they come back with part 2, when they come, with the Winter Soldier movie, I mean, that thing is like one of the best action films of the 2010s, right? They're coming with some real heat when they bring that movie in. And this movie does not bring that kind of heat at all. And I wonder if that's what they needed to do. That's what they needed to, they needed to call up Spiro Rosados and be like, hey, whatever you're doing, drop it. We're going to pay you double. Come in here and just start blowing up a bunch of shit. And, and I think Kristen Wiig still would have worked as the Cheetah. But yeah, it's the Cheetah. It's Wonder Woman and maybe you still got Maxwell Lord doing whatever he's doing, but let's just blow up a bunch of stuff and let's make the best action movie we possibly can make. Maybe that's what this movie needed to be, and it's not quite that. It's more of the big adventure romp kind of thing, the kind of over the top superhero movie that maybe that wasn't what the sequel to Wonder Woman needed to be. Maybe that's the problem there. Maybe I needed to do that frame of reference way in the beginning before I started even talking about any of this. Is that if the first Wonder Woman is like the first Captain America, maybe the second Wonder Woman needed to be like Captain America: Winter Soldier, and that might have been the movie that everybody would have loved. And I think to some extent, we should, if we're going to think about a female-led action movie. And we're going to look at what the limits or what the high end can be. And maybe that's what they should have been thinking about. I mean, when they talked to the writer, when she created this movie, she was saying like, oh, the first one was a love story. This second one's going to be a love story too. Maybe it didn't need to be a love story, right? Maybe it needed to be. It needed to be a big old action movie, and to be honest, there's still some romance elements in that. The kind of the stuff going on between the Black Widow and Captain America is actually kind of fun in there. But I guess Patty Jenkins was the director, but I think she also had a part in writing the second one. I think it's she co-wrote the second one. I don't think it needed to be a love story. Just go see what worked really well with Winter Soldier and make that movie. I think it would have that might have been the better play, because there are some really great action sequences in this, especially like in Egypt. There's a really great sequence there that I really liked, and so maybe if we'd gotten more of that might have been what this thing needed. So Yeah, so I think I've rambled enough here between this and the previous two segments. So I think it's probably time to wrap this one up. So, just for some plugs, my newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, still available on Amazon, either Kindle or Kindle Unlimited, or you can get it in paperback. Always love it if somebody wants to pick that up. The money from those books definitely helps with the show. So, I'm trying to get better microphones, trying to get better recording equipment to make this show a little bit better. I will say the support that the show has been getting, the listenership has been growing since we've been doing once a week, which I really appreciated. I think that was what I was hoping for once a week, and so I'm going to try to keep working on once a week for new episodes with a guest, and then every other week for the DTVC Extra. We kind of keep working in that vein, but yeah, definitely got to get more recording equipment, things like that. So we don't have a Patreon. We don't, I mean, who knows? Maybe that's something that'll come at some point. Don't really have paid ads yet or anything like that. But a great way to support the site is buying the novels, or picking something up on the thread list. There, the links to both are in the podcast description. So yeah, always a great way. And I haven't really done the like and subscribe on iTunes or whatever, or rate and review on iTunes. I haven't really done that yet, but you're welcome to do that as well. It's been a while. I think the last review we got was when John Cross at After Movie Diner gave us a 5-star review. But if you're interested, if you're really enjoying what we're doing here, and you want to give it 5 stars, definitely go ahead. If you're thinking about giving it a 1 star, I guess you could do that as well too. If you really hate, though, I guess why are you listening if you're giving us a 1 star? Unless I've really insulted you. If the Wonder Woman discussion really upset you, then yeah, give me a 1 star, or whatever. However you decide to go there. But anyway, I'm rambling now for sure. So we'll definitely wrap it up here. But thank you everybody for listening, and we'll be back soon. All right, bye everyone.
Direct to video, direct